No.
Welcome into the Gators Online Podcast, live from Spurger's Gridiron Grill. Zach Abolverdi and Nick Torre here. Today we'll be joined in studio by Jeff Cardozo to talk about the epic game at Condren Ballpark the other night between the Gators and Seminoles, a walk-off in the ninth inning, and obviously an exciting weekend here in Gainesville, not only because the regular season for the baseball team comes to an end, but Mick Hubert will be calling his final games for the Gators. A huge announcement today as he is calling it a career after 33 years. We'll get Nick's details and nuggets from his trip to Fort Lauderdale on Wednesday. So a lot to talk about on today's show, and we haven't even gotten to Jimbo yet.
Man. Oh, that's what's the old saying? There's no honor amongst thieves. I feel like the SEC and college coaches are just like, listen, we're all kind of doing some stuff that might not be by the book. Let's just not telling each other. And all of a sudden, NIL starts happening, and Nick Saban doesn't get the number one recruiting class, and he's angry, and he's going to shake his fist, and he's starting to go Tekashi 6ix9ine and point fingers, at the stand. So it's been crazy to see those two go back and forth. I think Nick Saban is going on a radio show today to respond to the response.
He is. And then we still got to see Deion Sanders is apparently going to chime in after Nick Saban called out him and his top recruit that he signed. And you got to think that, Deion might feed off a little bit of that FSU energy from Jimbo and kind of,
Could you imagine being a Pac-12 football fan? Like, you're not doing this right now.
No, you're not
doing that. This is, it just means more. This is what it means.
And I was talking to you about this before we started recording. I think it's interesting to me how Billy Napier has approached all this. And, he has said some things, like you mentioned, kind of subtly, where he is saying, hey, this isn't good. But at the same time, it's here, and if this is what it is, we're going to play to win. And he's definitely not taking the approach of a Nick Saban or a Lane Kiffin where he's complaining. He's like, hey, let's roll our sleeves up and get after it.
It's interesting because it's NIL has completely changed the power dynamic. I think if you're looking at a guy, when Christian Robinson first came to Florida, he was making $80,000 a year. There's dozens of college football players that are making more now with their name, image, and likeness than Christian Robinson. I think you're getting to a point where it's
crazy to put it like that.
You might have players that are making more on your roster than the guys who are telling them, hey, you need to win sprints after practice, or like, you need to win sprints after practice. So I think the old guard, and Dabo Swinney said years ago, if they start paying college players, I might have to retire. We're still waiting on you to walk away from those salary checks. But it's changing the dynamic. And I don't think that you're a type A personality if you're a Division I college football coach. And I don't think you like to have the power dynamic shift. And for so long, Nick Saban has been ruling college football. And now Texas A&M comes in, and did they do it legally? Did they do it illegally? Nothing has been proven.
Got Miami out there.
Miami seems to be doing it illegally and flaunting it that they're doing it illegally. So that means the U is back. The U is actually back. Now that the U is cheating and flaunting it, the U is back. But I think, to me, it's just guys who have dominated and dominated because of rules that they were used to, and they had things in place that they could be successful. Now the game is changing, and I think Nick Saban either sees some of that power slipping from him, and he's lashing out. They say that the emperor who loses his empire lashes out, and I think you might be seeing that in Tuscaloosa.
Well, you mentioned Clemson, and we've obviously talking about Alabama, and you mentioned parity.
What parity in college football?
I mean,
what parity?
For the longest, I think maybe with the before Georgia's ascension, before Ohio State, when it was Alabama and Clemson kind of going back and forth, same national championship game matchups. What was like the common theme that everybody would throw out there about those two programs, specifically as it relates to recruiting?
Oh, they were getting the best players.
Yeah, but what were the fans saying?
No, they were paying for the best
They're cheating.
Players.
They're cheating. And Jimbo Fisher came out today and on Thursday and basically said in between the lines that Nick Saban's been cheating all along.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one thing for college football fans on Twitter or a message board to say, oh, Alabama's paying players. For Jimbo Fisher to come right back, take the gloves off, and respond to Saban the way that he did. I mean, have you seen it?
Called him a narcissist.
You were driving back from Fort Lauderdale. Have you watched the press conference yet?
I was in the car streaming it. Thanks to TexAgs, streaming it.
I mean, look, and I know we have some listeners that are not Jimbo Fisher fans, so I'm not trying to talk about him for too long. But if you have not seen it, it is probably one of the most epic press conferences, if not in SEC history and college football history. I mean, to have one coach going at another coach that aggressively, 10 minutes straight.
Called him a narcissist. Jimbo Fisher also
said he needs to be slapped.
That's why I left this out here. Jimbo Fisher also said, I don't lie, I don't cheat. I learned early on as a boy that if you do those, you get smacked in the head. Maybe he, speaking of Saban, should have gotten slapped a little more. Didn't take me too long to go find, but July 2nd, 2020, the Texas A&M football program violated NCAA recruiting and countable athletically related activity rules. Part of that was that the head coach, Jimbo Fisher, fostered an environment of, I forget the term they use, but like unaccountability, fostered a cheating environment. So it's like they say, don't throw stones in a glass house. And I think that's why you haven't.
He said that today.
He literally said today, I don't lie, I don't cheat. And I was like, buddy, actually, July 2nd, less than 2 years ago, coming up on 2-year anniversary, you were on probation for lying and cheating in recruiting, which is what you're being accused of doing now. Yeah. I just think it's a don't throw stones in a glass house thing.
And he said, I know.
Coaching circles are so tight, and it's like, hey, Jimbo Fisher worked with Nick Saban. They probably cheated together while on the same staff.
That's another thing he alluded to.
All these coaches know where the bodies are buried, so it's like, hey, don't tell the NCAA where I buried my body because I know where we buried that other body that's in your backyard. So that's what really has been so interesting about this is that for the longest time, it's almost like a mafia. It's like you take a blood oath in, you're a college coach. We're not going to talk about what happens in the family business, whether it's dirt or it's good. We're not going to talk about it. I just can't. And now they're talking about it. Very publicly.
We haven't been around Billy long. I cannot imagine him going out there in a press conference like that, talking about another coach. And I'm not saying Jimbo's wrong for doing it, but like it takes a lot to get a guy to lose his cool or to like break the coach's code, so to speak. And remember what Napier said in that one press conference when he was asked about Georgia's, we don't worry about the neighbor's yard. We got our own grass to mow. And I think he likes to take that attitude, but I am just interested to see how this beef between these two coaches is just going to play out over the course of the summer, how that's going to impact SEC spring meetings, SEC media days.
In 2 weeks, they're going to be in a very small room together. Oh. Jimbo and Nick. I wrote about it last night on Gators Online. Take advantage of a 7 day free membership. Talking to Billy about it, and I'll have a couple more stories on it because I think NIL is changing not just recruiting high school players, but the transfer portal as well. And I think Billy is not complaining about it, kind of like these guys are, but he does want some kind of regulation. Because right now, it almost feels like to him, we're playing a board game, but we threw out the rule book years ago. And now we're kind of just like making up rules. It's like if you tried to play Monopoly, but you didn't know the rules. And you're like, no, we're just going to make it up now. I can buy that house because I have more money in the bank than you. So I'm going to buy all 3 of those. So I think he wants regulation or some guidance. But I also feel like he's not going to get left behind.
No.
Which is what we said to Scott when we were talking to Scott Strickland. I was like, are you worried about getting left behind? You're going to play it as safe and as square, even if you might get left behind. He's like, yeah. And I'm like, I don't know if Billy's going to be left behind. Not saying that he's going to cheat, but listen, if we're playing by rules of combat that are different than the rules that are being enforced, then I will play by the rules of combat.
Yeah. And also too, I mean, I think that you look at the way this is kind of played out for Billy. I mean, I think that with the establishment of the Gator Guard, as we wrote about last week, they're in a place that I think Florida is going to be one of the top NIL powers in college football. So if you're not a program or don't have an alumni base and a donor base that can put you in position like that, you're probably going to be one of those coaches that is complaining. And I think the fact that Billy hasn't been, speaks to where maybe he feels like Florida can be in this space. Before we get to this break and bring Jeff in here, I do want to talk about your trip to Fort Lauderdale to see Billy. It was his second to last speech for his spring speaking tour. You got, you and Jacob were the only guys to sit down with him. What were some of the things that he had to share with you guys, and also what did he have to say to the crowd last night?
Yeah, I think the first couple questions I wanted to ask him were about his comments, and I think, we have kind of like a gotcha society almost, and he said, hey, we're going to be very aggressive in the transfer portal. And I think when that didn't happen in the spring portal, fans were quick to, start getting on him.
Yeah.
He was quick to note we were very aggressive in the winter portal, and we got 6 guys. Now, to play both sides, 3 of them were just following you from your school. But you also get a Jack Miller, a Boateng, and who's the
Jalen Kimber.
And Jalen Kimber from Georgia. So you did get 6, and I think all of those guys. I mean, Kimber has a chance to start. Montrell Johnson has a chance to start. If not, probably will get 100 carries this year along with the other guys.
Torrance is starting. Definitely.
Torrance is your starter. And then, Jack Miller's your backup.
Yeah.
So you did
one play away from starting.
One play away from starting from behind a quarterback who spent a lot of time in the training room last year. So you did a really good job in that portal. Then I look at, they're at 89 scholarships right now. So how aggressive can you be in this portal? I asked him about, you didn't have a lot of guys transfer out. You really had 4. You had Emory Jones, Carlos Del Rio, a kicker in Chris Howard, and a defensive player in Jalen Lee. No, not Jalen Lee. Lamar Goods.
Yeah.
And Lamar Goods. I'm like, you only had 4 guys leave, and one of them was 3 days into practice.
Yeah. It was after he made those comments about being aggressive and we're going to go out there. They had 3 guys leave, 1 from each side of the ball.
Yeah.
So there wasn't this mass exodus that everybody anticipated.
Right. And to me, that can be good. Listen, yeah, it's nothing against Billy or against, a Lincoln Riley at USC. When a new coach comes in, hey, me as a student athlete, I didn't sign up. I wasn't recruited by this guy. I didn't sign to play for him. This isn't the offense or the defense that I feel good in. That's not what I wanted to be here for. I'll try it out in the spring. And I think you and I were both waiting for 5, 6, 7, 8 guys, like guys who tried it out and just didn't like the program.
Yeah.
Hey, I like coach, great guy. Think he could be successful here. It's not for me. That just never happened.
Yeah, we literally were like waiting the last few days of the month. Like, here comes May 1st. It's
like
got to be happening.
Waiting on May 1st. And now I think, you're going to get a JUCO, blank on the name, but you're going to get a JUCO defensive lineman that's coming in. There's, Ricky Purcell, I don't know how to say it, the receiver from Arizona State that you're trying to get in. But now if you're going to get him, then you're at 90. You still have to have a tough conversation with 5 people.
Yeah.
And if it's someone like, let's say like a Jordan Pouncey who graduates, he can go and play right away. And the May 1st deadline doesn't matter to him.
Yeah.
But
I think
it's have some tough conversations with 4 or 5 guys.
And the reason why is what you also reported and asked Billy about in Fort Lauderdale, and got some clarification finally from him, which was there is no super seniors this year. That was a one-time waiver from the NCAA last year as a result of the 2020 season. So the 4 guys that Florida has on its roster that are super seniors are going to count against the 85. So we thought at that 89 number, had that waiver also been in effect for 2022, the Gators would be in good shape. But
85 right now.
And then here's the thing. You're not going to tell some of your super seniors that they can't come back.
No,
Trey Dean's coming back. The way Bateman talked about Bernie, he's absolutely coming back. So it's going to be, Nick and I are not going to speculate on who some of those players could be. Maybe there's some guys that Napier and the staff already know are on their way out. Maybe they're waiting for the summer so that they can graduate and get their degree before they move on to their next school. So we're just going to have to watch it play out, but there are going to have to be some departures between now and fall training camp.
I mean, just numbers game. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It was interesting. I looked up an NCAA bylaw. You can, there's a bylaw where you can cut somebody. A first-year head coach can cut somebody. You can still honor their academic scholarship, so you can still pay for their school. But it's just a bylaw that the NCAA has in place where the coach, who's a first-year coach, says, hey, listen, he doesn't want to transfer. I don't want him against my 85. He's not going to play for us, and we're above numbers. We will continue paying for his education, but we're going to cut him. And I think it's like a coach designation that is a bylaw. So maybe that's a route or an avenue that Billy Napier goes.
Yeah. But to your point, as you kind of started talking about this topic, the fact that a bunch of guys didn't hit the doors as soon as spring ball ended speaks to everything that we've heard throughout the spring and the offseason, which was that these players are buying into this new staff, that they've created a better player experience for them. Obviously, that was not just talk.
Yeah.
Because if it had been, you'd have seen about 5 to 10 guys say, see ya. After practices were over. So we're going to see you guys on the other side of this break. We'll bring Jeff Cardozo in to talk some Florida baseball and also get his thoughts on Billy Napier and his first spring with the Florida Gators.
Hi, Steve Spurrier here. Making a reservation at my restaurant is easier than a Saturday afternoon homecoming game against Vandy. You don't have to call or email. Just go to spurriers.com, hit the reservation button, pick a date, number of guests, and a time. It's so simple, I can do it. In fact, I just did. Maybe I'll see you tonight.
Looking for more reasons to celebrate? We have them here at Celebration Point. Enjoy some of the newest additions to our already celebratory lineup, like Dave & Buster's, Les Macarons, and Prime and Pearl. There's always a reason to celebrate. Join us anytime for any occasion. Celebration Point, where Gators come to celebrate.
Welcome back into the Gators Online Podcast, and we're now joined by our guest of the week, very special man himself, Jeff Cardozo. Little chomp chat connection back here in Spurs Gridiron Grill.
Way back when.
Yeah, absolutely. How's it going, my friend?
It's good. It's obviously a fun, busy time of year. You would think that once football ended, it would slow down, but obviously baseball season and everything else for us is a little bit crazy in the spring. Spring's way busier, and now you got postseason and hopefully a little run to Omaha when it's all said and done.
No doubt. So we're going to obviously talk some baseball with Jeff. We'll get his thoughts on Billy Napier and the football team as well. But look, man, we got to start with the other night. I was in the ballpark. Nick was in the ballpark. Obviously, you're on the mic. And take us through that ninth inning, man, and obviously that just absolute no doubter, as you called it, by Sterling Thompson.
A lot of fun. And, Nick, you've seen enough baseball. You never know when something's going to happen, what's going to happen. You think, all right, 8 and 9, get out. And then Langford gets to a 2-strike count, and guy throws him a fastball, and just a harmless little single says, okay, well, we're going to now keep things going. And then, I don't know. You hate to criticize coaches sometimes, but I'm even thinking to myself, thank God he's taken out that dude with a nasty splitter change. Yeah. Like Thompson had already swung over a couple of changeups earlier in the game and struck out. And like, this is playing right into what the Gators can do. And then you look at the dude's numbers, he'd given up 3 bombs in 10 innings. I'm like, sweet, this is going to go pretty good. And then Thompson just sits on a slider and absolutely drills it. So a lot of fun. I think you're seeing these guys play a little bit better. Now, you still like the bottom part of the order to do some damage and contribute a little bit more. You can't win if it's just Langford, Riopelle, and Thompson. So, Judd, I think, will figure it out, and some of these other guys will get better. But it's it's better to be winning than losing down the stretch.
That's for sure. I was wondering why you even pitched to Langford at that point. And then you go 3-0, and I think, okay, well, just throw the intentional walk out now. Yeah. Thompson's he got hit by a pitch, but it struck out twice earlier. And hey, I'd rather pitch to him than maybe the hottest hitter in the country right now, Langford. They don't do that, but you get a 2-strike single, and then I think it was just overthinking on Martin's part. It was just get a left-on-left matchup, and I think they had a righty ready in the pen in case Judd was going to get up. I think he's just overthinking it. You got a guy that's shoving, and I even questioned Kevin O'Sullivan. I was like, what are you doing taking Tyler Nesbitt out of the game in the ninth? Yeah. He retired 10 in a row. The only hit he gives up is a bunt because you guys had the third baseman playing too far back. Not even any fault of his own. Yeah, not even any fault of Tyler Nesbitt. So I think coaches can get into, especially close game late, rivalry game, late in the season, start to, overthink some situations. And I think that's what happened with FSU.
I just think you have to give such an appreciation for, I mean, you're a South Florida guy. You know, Miami was really good against the Gators back in the day, 15, 20 years ago. I mean, for Sully, even Florida State, but for Sully to win 19 of 24 now against Florida State,
Dominance.
like it's just, it's dominant over Florida State and Miami. And, you know, they do really well midweeks this year with a team that everybody thinks is down. But I think when it's all said and done, these freshmen are starting to figure it out.
Now, our theory is I'm the good luck charm there, right?
That's not
Every
the
time you
theory.
show
That's
up?
not the working theory at all.
Listen, I just can't be in the press box. That's,
Yeah.
So I went to the season opener, and then I had a wedding down in South Florida, so I missed Saturday, Sunday against Liberty. Zach covered for me, so the message board 3 games into the season already
Crushing
banned
him.
Zach from then Florida Ballpark, now Conjure Ballpark, who was banned.
But now
Zach
if I
was
show up
banned.
as a spectator, they're undefeated. So we got something going there.
Good.
And obviously the Gators got it going here recently. First of all, where does that hit in that moment rank in the last maybe 5 years? Obviously the Gators walked it off against FSU last time they played in Gainesville, but probably the best moment that we've seen so far in Conjure Ballpark.
Oh, yeah, in Conjure Ballpark, I think for sure. And the crowd was great, so kudos to everybody who showed up, about 7,000 people there that night. And I don't get the true feel of stuff because of the headset, so sometimes I'll take it off and you hear the energy in the crowd, and it makes a difference. Like, listen, when you go to Starkville and there's 12,000 people that are nut jobs yelling and screaming, and, you know, even Tennessee now, but certainly Arkansas and LSU and places like that, I'd love to see the Conjure Ballpark get like that. That was special. I think still the number one has to be the Lang with a bang and sending them to Omaha with the walk off there.
What a call too!
Yeah, that was a
Lang
fun
with
one.
the bang.
And that's just something you don't even think about, like just whatever instinctually comes to you. Now, I did want to
Jay-Z in the studio, just whatever
That's right,
comes
just
to the top
whatever
of the
comes.
head. That's-
Now, luckily, what didn't come to my head though was, I mean, you weren't in Missouri, but the ball that Caglione hit that like went 490 or whatever it was, and very on top of the dang indoor facility. I think I paused for about 4 seconds because I wanted to say like, "Holy sh!" You know, it's one of those like you know it's gone. And it's just when you react, like you want to be a fan and just holy crap. But you know, certainly you could tell that ball was going to be gone off the bat. But playing it up and having some fun with it is always awesome.
I think the estimated distance was 431. It might have been 400 feet up in the air as well. Just a majestic shot.
Still might be coming down. Honestly. And hopefully the Gators don't come down from this high that they've reached. What has this recent turnaround meant, I think, for this team, and how big is it for them to be playing like this head to the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, it puts them back in a chance to even host. You go and you beat South Carolina a few times and maybe get to the weekend in Hoover. I think you got a chance with the same resume as last year to basically now get one of these spots. Now, the tough part's going to be if they are still 7th or 8th or 9th in the seeding in the SEC tournament, then there's no way you're going to get a top 16 seed when you're 8th in your conference. So if they can somehow sneak up there, get some help this weekend on the last weekend of SEC play, then, I mean, who knows? But either way, I think he's figured out some roles, and even without Barco, Sproat's gotten ready and he understands things. I mean, Neely's been great, and I mean, we've been waiting for Pogue all year, and now he's back and he looked spectacular against Missouri. So hopefully keep it going.
You and I watched Brandon Neely throw 37 innings in the bullpen in Miami. I feel like the second inning of every game, he just sent to the bullpen, he started throwing. I'm like, is this kid ever going to throw? And he's been a strikeout artist since he's come in. And
almost like Jeff.
That's right.
Almost like Jeff. I looked at his record today. I'm like 2-1. Looked at his ERA. I'm like, that doesn't tell the full
whole
tale
deal.
of how good he's looked. And has gotten some tough no decisions as well. I've been wrestling with this in my own mind. I mean, going back, it's crazy that we're talking about potentially hosting because after getting swept by Tennessee, they were 6-12 in the SEC, the worst start in 15 years. And we're talking tournament bubble. And to even get to the point where we're talking about hosting, I think is a remarkable run. I've been wrestling with, are you just beating up on the bad teams? But even if that is the case, you're not losing. You're getting the job done. And obviously, that stretch of Arkansas, Vanderbilt, and Tennessee was your toughest test. Started off well, didn't end well. But I think Florida's playing probably the lower tier teams in the SEC, but they're getting the job done. A huge sweep at Mississippi State. Should have probably swept at Missouri. And then there's also some of those games against those other teams. You look and you could think 4 or 5 pitches.
Easy.
And you're 6 wins better than you are now.
No question. Yep. So it's good. But I think they are playing better. I think he's figured out roles for the pitchers and when to use them, when not to use them. Certainly some of the freshmen, I think mentally have gotten better. And then, now this change in the lineup a little bit has helped as well. So it's been fun.
And obviously trying to get back to Omaha, that's going to be the goal, and get one of those chances at a national championship. And I was putting together Mick Hubert's top 10 calls from his career, and obviously that had to go on there, Jeff. And before we let you go, just wanted to get your thoughts on what it's been like to share the booth with Mick and be part of some of those special moments here in the last, 5 to 10 years. And I was telling Nick earlier today, I know that there was one of those where he cried afterwards.
Yeah.
So you've really seen his true range of emotions.
Yeah, and I think the greatest thing about Mick is, one, as much as he helped me, I wouldn't be where I am as a broadcaster without him, and just telling me how to do it, the right way to go about it, how to prepare. I think that's the biggest thing that I learned from him. But he's always just so into it. And you look at a game where you're thinking, I'm just talking about a sport, whatever it might be. But at the end of the game, he's sweating, he's into it, he's intense, and it's so fun to watch. I think there's a couple. The moment we cried together was when the Gators won the national title in baseball in 2017. He's going through that emotional call, and I'm sitting there tearing up, and then it's finally my turn to talk, and he's crying, I'm crying, and it was really, really special. But the other one that I'll never forget was the LSU game and the stop at the goal line, and I'm probably, for me to right here on Nick. And, I'm letting him go through it and make the call. And I just put my arm around him and we kind of look at each other and just smile. And it was such a cool moment that I'll always remember. But for a guy to have done that now for 3 decades, and, certainly everybody knows what he's meant to this university. And I'm just lucky to, spend some of that time with him. But yeah, to be able to sit there in so many different booths with him and, kind of go to dinners and talk and be able to be around him has made me a better person for sure.
And one quick one, I might be showing my youth, hopefully showing my youth here.
Don't want to show your age.
Your call when somebody's scoring. He's a brown-eyed, handsome man.
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
Well, it's from the song Center Field, John Fogerty. Baseball guys, you've heard that so much. So just, and it didn't start that way, but, every time you'd say it and you're making a call, it's like, all right, there's a guy on second base. So ground ball up the middle, he's rounding third, he's heading for home. And then
he's a brown-eyed, handsome man.
And then that's what the song says. So then, so John Fogerty, I stole that from you, but I think he stole that from somebody else, what I was told one time. But yeah, so it just always comes into my head, and it's cool. Like there was my son played at Buchholz this past year, and then the little video comes on during their end of the year banquet, and the first song that comes on is Center Field. Yeah. So you da, 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 da. And then it comes on. I'm sitting there singing to myself, and then hey, there's the brown-eyed handsome man part. So that's where it came about.
Well, as Billy Napier told me, you learn over time that everything you stole from someone else.
There you go. Yeah.
And Florida fans, you will be able to check out this fall Billy Napier and Jeff Cardozo live from Spurs Gridiron Grill every Thursday for the Coaches Show.
I think they're switching it to Mondays is what I'm hearing. So it might be on Mondays now, so he can have more time to prepare on the back end of the year. But
that's a smart move on his part. Yeah. Well, obviously you've had some interactions with him. Just what have been your early impressions so far of him and kind of what he's done this spring with the football program?
I think the coolest part is, and I run a business, so I hire people and I trust them to do their jobs.
Sure.
And he's made 50 hires, but it's like, hey, you're designed just to be the guy that sorts the gummy bears, or, you're just doing this specific role. So now if you have 50 people doing just that, they're going to be pretty damn good at everything that they do. And I think personality-wise, the first time I got to meet him, it was actually in a baseball game. It was after he threw out the first pitch, and he'd rather sit there and talk about me than him. And I'm trying to talk to him about, everybody and get it out there. So he's got that infectious personality. I think, there's a lot to love about the guy. I'm really anxious to work with him as we move forward and just kind of be a part of that. I don't know if it's a rebuild, but it's just that process of getting the Gators where they should be. Sure. And he's done it at other places, and I think there's no question in my mind he'll get the Gators to do it as well.
Well, we had no question that you were going to come in here and knock it out. And hopefully next time that we see you, man, it'll be after a long trip to Omaha.
Yeah, always good.
So, all right, we're going to catch this break. We'll come back on the other side and wrap up the Gators Online Podcast. Appreciate Jeff Cardozo for joining us.
Hi, Steve Spurrier here. You know, making a reservation at my restaurant is easier than a Saturday afternoon homecoming game against Vandy. You don't have to call or email. Just go to spurriers.com, hit the reservation button, pick a date, number of guests, and a time. It's so simple, I can do it. In fact, I just did. Maybe I'll see you tonight.
Looking for more reasons to celebrate? We have them here at Celebration Point. Enjoy some of the newest additions to our already celebratory lineup, like Dave & Buster's, Les Macarons, and Prime and Pearl. There's always a reason to celebrate. Join us anytime for any occasion. Celebration Point, where Gators come to celebrate.
Welcome back into the Gators Online Podcast. Zach and Nick here. Appreciate Jeff for joining us and talking some Florida baseball and Florida football, and going to be interested to see what his son can do. Didn't have a chance to mention that with him, but he's actually at Buchholz, Nick, and is going to be playing some quarterback for the Bobcats, which will give Creed Whittemore an opportunity to play some receiver for them this year, and as he's going to be playing that position for the Gators at the next level. So
all-state baseball pitcher. So
man,
Jeff, if you're watching, already better than Dad. We're already the apple fell far enough from the tree that we're gonna get some strikeouts and hopefully a state championship for them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he got some good genes from Jeff.
Yeah,
Clearly.
And Jeff doesn't have to say it. We don't want to put him on the spot, but we'll get to Mick Hubert a little bit. We talked to Jeff a little about it, but potential next voice of the Gators.
I mean, I didn't want to say it, but everybody else will.
Yeah, I'll say it. I'll say it for Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. He's done an absolute fabulous job covering the Florida baseball team and being the voice of the Gators there. So he, that used to be Mick's role that he held until the 2017 season. So obviously, kind of turnover there with Mick kind of moving on as the Gators bring in a new football coach, new basketball coach, and obviously a lot of excitement this spring as Napier kind of goes around the state. What was some of the feedback that you saw kind of from the crowd and just the anticipation that there's some new energy now with the football program after how last year went?
The crowd was big into recruiting.
Yeah.
And you've been to a couple of these. I'm sure most of the questions are recruiting centered. It was a really good crowd at the Signature Grand there. They call it Fort Lauderdale. We call it, people who are from there, we call it Davie. But it's it was a good crowd. Billy was really cool. It was really cool just to be just the two of us, Jacob Rudner and myself there, kind of get 20 minutes, just us and Billy. So he was good. And then I think he's gotten the hang of these speaking tours. And the biggest thing I got from talking to people after it, my dad was there as well, is he's just a really good speaker. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of talk slow and deliberately. They're like, it just seems like he says what he means. And I'm like, well, he talks slow and deliberately. That might be the Georgia A&M, but I think that's really what I've heard everybody say. Fans, people around Gainesville that have talked to Billy, is just that it seems like he cares about the players, about whoever he's talking to at the time. And he might just be meeting you, for the first time as a fan, and he makes you feel, I think, I got that sense with Billy Donovan. When I would talk to Billy Donovan, the few times I was able to,
very engaging.
I remember telling someone, I was like, man, I felt like I was the only person in the room when I was talking to Billy. And I think Billy Napier gives that kind of feeling, that sense to the people that he talks to. Like, he's not worried about 8,000 other things or this recruit or what's happening here. He's fully engaged in every conversation that he's having.
Or dismissive, because sometimes you get ridiculous questions at those events. And
you can, yeah.
And,
well, that was a lot of hypotheticals.
Yes, a lot of hypotheticals. Obviously, the question that was asked in Pensacola, where I was at last week, that is clearly on the minds of a lot of Gator fans, judging by our page views, was the black uniforms.
Yeah.
He was asked about that in the Q&A.
Right up here.
And apparently we're going to be seeing those in the Swamp in 2023, second to last home game. And that was something that he had already talked about with Richard Johnson, but now we know exactly when it's happening, what game and what time of the season that's happening. I love that he figured out the right way with a great cause to get all these fans on board that have been against it for so long.
Because it's a very black and white. There's no gray area. There's not many fans. If you are one of them, let us know on the message board. But there's not many fans I've ever come across that have been like, I wouldn't mind a black jersey. It's either if Florida wears black jerseys, I will go down there and I will burn them myself, or why can't we wear black jerseys? That'd be the coolest thing ever. A night game in the swamp, black jerseys.
This
that's
school
great.
does it. That school does it.
Yeah. And it's fought
The other
with,
Gator teams do it.
fought with black's not a school color. We shouldn't wear it. So it was a hot button issue. And I think what Billy's doing, if you haven't read about it, if this is the first you're hearing about it, is the jerseys, the black jerseys that Florida will wear will be auctioned off with that money going to, I think, some of it to like the Wounded Warrior Project or just to local families who have had veterans, whether it's first responders or military members who have been wounded in action or have come on hard times after their service is done.
Which is awesome.
The proceeds of those black jerseys. And listen, with the amount of enthusiasm for decades that has been building around black jerseys, I think you're going to raise some pretty good money, some pretty sizable money from the auctioning off of an Anthony Richardson black jersey.
And he knows, too. He's clearly savvy enough to know that this is a hot-button topic because as soon as it got brought up, you heard the boos, and he grabbed the mic and was like, here's some boos in the back. By the time he got done with his reply, he had gotten 3 different rounds of applauses. And in addition to donating the money, they're going to have basically a whole week dedicated to military appreciation, have somebody from a different branch of the military speak to the team after each day of practice. So, and as he's breaking this down, every time he gets done with another nugget, just the room goes crazy. So very smart of him to, I think, find a way that it's a win-win for everybody. And that's going to be coming in 2023.
I think that kind of goes back to what I was talking about before when everyone says, I think the word I was maybe missing there was intentional. Everything he does is intentional.
Yeah.
And people are finding that out the first time they see him in person, the first time they have a one-on-one interaction with him. You're not just doing black jerseys because some people wanted them or kids think they're cool. There's an intention and a purpose behind it.
Yeah, and he knows from being at Louisiana and seeing what starting that tradition with the black uniforms and the military appreciation, kind of what that did for his program, what that meant for his players. And it just makes sense, especially, again, it's not like this is something that is forbidden at the University of Florida. You literally have other sports teams that wear black jerseys.
Baseball has a black jersey. Basketball's been wearing them. Softball has a black jersey.
They're sick in basketball.
Yeah. I'm pulling up the schedule. Let's figure out what game it could be. So it's going to be in November.
It's 2023.
2023.
And they already have the date for Veterans Day. So, I mean, you kind of already know the week that it's going to be.
Oh, and then we don't have the schedule yet for then.
They don't have it set yet. And obviously it's going to be.
Veterans Day is always November 11th.
Yes, around that time. So it's like,
First, second game in November.
It'll either be their last SEC game potentially at home, or
could be an FSU game. Oh no, I have 2023 FSU's away,
or it'll be like one of those dog teams that they play. Which Napier also talked about that in Pensacola about opening the season with Utah. I had a ton of respectful things to say about them, but was like, hey, I mean, obviously he didn't have anything to do with this scheduling, but he's for playing formidable opponents week 1, and I think he better be, because we're just going to keep seeing more of that trend. I mean, the days of opening your season with 2 cupcake teams are kind of over, I think.
Yummy.
Yeah.
Well, that can lead us into the next segment, which is the NCAA came out and two big things really from this is one. The initial counter and the recruiting limitations. You can only have 25 people sign in a class. That's gone with. You can sign 80 players in a class. If you only had 5 on scholarship, you should have to be under that 85 limit when fall camp starts. The other one is they paved the way, cleared the way for conferences to do away with divisions. The Pac-12 must have known that was coming because they came out right away and they're like, "Yep, our divisions are done." And I think you'll see teams go away with divisions. Greg Sankey was asked about it and said,
Not so fast.
the division model works for us. And it says that works for us, and we're going to do it. Now, the issue is, and we've talked about this, and ever since Oklahoma and Texas announced that they were going to be coming to the SEC, at 16 teams, you need to add that 9th SEC game.
Yep.
You can't have just 8. And then how are you going to have divisions? You've got to have pods. So I think that'll be a fun exercise. I'll have that up probably next week. I'll try to figure out what a pod would look like.
Ooh.
Because you have 4 pods, 4 teams, but there's so many rivalries that you have to have. Auburn and Alabama have to play. Alabama and Tennessee have to play.
But it also
Florida
has
and
to make
Georgia.
sense from a geographical standpoint.
Florida and Georgia have to play. Florida and Tennessee have to play. You can't have Georgia, Auburn, Tennessee, and Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, and Georgia in a pod. That's a ridiculous pod. That's a crazy pod. You can't have that. So I think it's probably going to be a fun mental exercise, or I'll just get sick of it. But there's a lot of history and tie-ins and rivalry games you have to uphold.
Yeah, can't lose them.
It will certainly be. It'll certainly take the SEC time. I'm sure they've already started to try to figure it out, because I've tried to do it before, and it's tough to find 9 conference games, putting teams into 4 pods, and it'll be interesting. But no doing away with the divisions for the SEC until conference expansion.
Yeah, and that's basically what Sankey said is if there was going to be that time for this conference, it would be when Oklahoma and Texas get added to the league. So
You will not have an East and a West when Oklahoma and Texas come in.
But you're also going to not have the East and the West go away before then, and unless, like he said, our conference leaders come to me and say, hey, we want to do away with divisions.
Yep.
The sentiment that they've shared with him is that they don't want that. So the SEC is not following the lead of the Pac-12. We'll see if any other Power 5 schools, decide to do that. But I think everybody knew that was coming at some point. I think everyone was interested to see what was going to happen with the initial counters and that whole mess, because with the transfer portal and like you mentioned at the start of this podcast, when you have a coaching change and might have a mass exodus from a roster of 20, 30 players, Tennessee went through that, a couple of years ago. You have to be able to make up for those losses with a huge signing class, and you can't be limited by this arbitrary number. So
I think USC, when Lincoln Riley has come over, they've had 40 players leave, and some of that is graduation. They had 9 players.
had 4.
They had 9 players declare for the draft.
I guess you go back to January, though. Ford had Diabate and Bogle and some other guys.
Right. So they had like 40, and some of them was that bylaw that I mentioned before, where I think they have 5 or 6 guys who were cut from the football team but are just staying at USC as students, and that's getting paid for. Which, hey, that's a private school. That's a big price tag that USC is picking up, and they're not playing football. But yeah, like 40, and you have to hit the portal and have to do things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because with the transfer portal and being able to leave, it's just like, okay, well, does Alabama go out and sign 40 guys this year? And then just tell some guys like, hey, we got 40, so like you 15 need to leave.
Yeah, it's going to be really, I think, change how teams go about recruiting. Hopefully it doesn't have too negative of an impact on high school.
Yeah.
Guys, maybe it gives them more opportunities potentially. But I'm just glad that there's starting to now be some clarification for that, for the super seniors. And, as we watch over these coming months, I think we'll see Florida's roster shake out. We'll see if they add any more additions from the transfer portal. Nick mentioned the defensive lineman, the wide receiver from Arizona State, still waiting on those guys to make their decisions. The defensive lineman will be in town this weekend for an official visit. Before we get to this weekend and all the things happening on campus, I do want to talk with Nick a little bit about that game on Tuesday and just his standpoint in the press box and just what you feel like this win means for this team in the short term and obviously maybe potentially with seeding for the tournament.
It's wild. Florida was so was playing so poorly and looked so lost. I ran out of ways to ask Kevin O'Sullivan. Just watching these losses, I'm just like, well, I saw you lose that exact same way last week, so what did I ask you then? Or it's just like, well, lost Saturday the exact same way you lost Friday, so I guess just like run those questions back. And at that point, I was like, man, Florida is really in danger of not making the NCAA tournament. And my first year covering Florida baseball was 2013, and they lost, I think, like 9 guys to the draft that year from the, that was like the Preston Tucker, Mike Zunino, Hudson Randall teams that went in 10, 11, 12 to the College World Series. And then they didn't have them in 13. They barely made the NCAA tournament at one game over 500 and then lost 2 in the Indiana Regional. And then in 2019, that team really struggled. And they go to the Lubbock Regional, and I was out there. I thought,
God,
man,
Lubbock.
Yeah, you can skip that one.
Yes, I can imagine.
You can skip that one. I thought, man, this team, I don't think they're worse than those two teams, but they're just playing poorly. And it was the worst at 6-12. It was the worst SEC start in 15 years under Kevin O'Sullivan. And now, we mentioned it with Jeff. I mentioned it to Jeff. I'm like, now Sterling Thompson on Tuesday night said, yeah, we're hoping to host a regional. And I was like,
what?
I'm like,
how did we get here?
I'm like, it's going to be tough, but like that's an actual conversation that can be had. And 5 weeks ago, I was wondering if you were going to even make the tournament. And now we're talking about hosting a regional.
What do you attribute the turnaround to?
You're playing much worse teams. That's one thing that helps. Florida, it was that 3-weekend stretch with Arkansas at home, Tennessee at home, and Vanderbilt. You started off well. You win 2 out of 3 against Arkansas. Then you lose 2 out of 3 at Vanderbilt and you need that Sunday win to avoid getting swept. Yep. And then you get swept at home by Tennessee. Sunday was in devastating fashion as well in extra innings.
That was they had that game in the bag.
Yeah, just completely blew it. Blake Purnell had a really bad outing there at the end of that one. I think it's twofold. One, the team is starting to play better. Like Jeff said, they're finding roles. You make a lineup change. Jack Caglianone, who's a freshman, he was going through Tommy John surgery. They stick him in. He can't throw a baseball right now. He's still in his throwing program, but he can DH. And he's hit some mammoth bombs, including the 480-foot bomb in Missouri. You put Wyatt Langford at the top of the order. Wyatt Langford's hitting 7 for 10 in first at-bats with 3 home runs.
Yeah, you wrote about that at Gators Online.
With 3 home runs. Wyatt Langford is one of the most dangerous hitters in the entire country over the last 12 games since being moved into the leadoff spot. Sterling Thompson's hitting above 430 since being moved into the 2-hole spot in front of Judd. And if you can just get Judd Fabian going, I think he's like 2 for 30. Since his 3 home run game against USF, I think he's like 2 for 34 with 14 strikeouts. He is just, it's hard to watch right now because you know how good he is. And he's a guy who's sitting on 19 home runs.
Yeah.
He's sitting under 250 now with this slump. If you get those 3 going, BT Riopel's hitting over 360 in the last 12 games. That's your first 4 batters. And then you've got Caglianone and Evans, who are freshmen who are coming on. That's a really tough lineup. The way Brandon Sproat's pitching, the way Brandon Neely's pitching, and you finally get Nick Pogue, who hasn't picked up his velocity yet, but is giving you solid innings on a Sunday. I'm looking at this Florida team, and I'm thinking, even if they don't host a regional, this is not a number 2 seed the way that they're playing right now that anyone who's hosting wants in their region. And even if the caveat to me saying, I don't want to sound too negative, I'm saying like, oh, they're just beating up on bad teams. But even that, you're still gaining confidence. And I think that's what you're seeing with Florida. Yeah. After losing to Tennessee, like this team was beaten. They were down. There was no confidence. So even though you're beating Missouri, who's the worst team in the SEC, Mississippi State, who lost their best pitcher and lost like nine guys from the national championship team, even though you're not beating the best teams, you're winning. You're finding different ways to win, whether it's a walk-off, whether you're beating somebody 13-0. You're finding different ways to win, and you're getting confidence. So I think that's a huge thing for Florida. Hosting a regional, what would that take? You probably have to sweep South Carolina this weekend,
Which they can do.
South Carolina comes in one game over 500. And South Carolina essentially needs to sweep Florida to make the NCAA tournament. Florida could sweep South Carolina. And if you sweep South Carolina and win 4 games in Hoover, get to the weekend like Jeff said, outside chance. Now, if you win your next 5 games, your next 6 games, and sweep South Carolina and win the SC tournament, I think that would make Florida a host. But listen, I was thinking the season was going to end this weekend or next week in Hoover about a month ago. So I'm just happy that I'll have more college baseball to watch and to write about, thanks to this, these last 15 or so days, 12 games.
Well, if there's going to be a little bit of magic in the air from Mick Hubert calling his final games, then maybe the Gators will get that sweep.
Is there something to that? Can Mick get a storybook ending?
Oh man, that would be cool.
What was real quick, because I know I talked forever there. What was your perspective of Sterling Thompson's home run? As a fan or someone in attendance.
Yes, yeah. But didn't have any orange and blue on. But I decided, hey, you know what? Baseball season's almost over. It's a midweek game. Didn't have any stories to write. So I'm like, you know what? I'm taking the boys out to the game. And, that's great at Florida that you can just on a whim decide to go to a baseball game and go get some berm tickets. Now, even showing up to the ballpark, I could have bought some other chair backs, but of course, my boys wanted to be in the foul ball area because they're trying to catch some foul balls. So we happened to be on the right berm and watched this ball get crushed right over our heads. And to be over there in the berm and have that place go crazy and the lights in the stadium, it's a really cool atmosphere that they've created there. You had walk-offs in McKeithen, but this is I think when you walk it off there, it's a party. And yeah, man, that's something that my boys will never forget, seeing that. And it was funny with my son, one of them, Sean, he's all about baseball, and the other one's more of a hoops football fan, so he's not really into baseball like that. He'll go to the games, but he's not invested. And he was invested that 9th inning, though. He got sucked in as the game went on, and you can't help but enjoy a game like that.
Yeah,
so
sports are so special that way. It's that's a memory that you'll have with your sons forever. I have a memory of my dad and my grandpa who passed away when I was in 5th grade, but we were at Al Leiter's no-hitter in Miami, and I must have been 6, 7 years old at the time.
Oh, wow.
And I start asking Dad and Grandpa, hey, can we leave? I'm tired. It's a Wednesday night. It's the 5th inning. It's dark. It's late. I want to go to bed. They're like, you shut up.
You are not leaving this seat.
They're like, you don't know exactly what's happening right now, but we're not leaving this until someone gets a hit or the game is over. So that's a funny story. Yep, they didn't let me leave, and now I have that memory of me trying to leave Al Leiter's no-hitter and my grandparent and my grandpa and my dad not letting me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, for all you Florida fans out there, I want to take you and encourage you to take a trip down memory lane. Go to Gators Online, and I put together a story where you can listen to the top 10 calls that Mick Hubert made during his career as the voice of the Florida Gators. Top 10, I think, at least.
I told Zach to do a top 5, and then the story gets published and there's 10.
Yeah. You could not limit Mick Hubert's 33-year career down to 5 calls. It was just impossible. I will say that one that was included in the story but didn't make the list only because I could not find an audio of it was his call from 1997 when the Gators upset number 1 Florida State. Dwayne Thomas gets the pick, and he makes the legendary call, "It's an insane asylum in the swamp." And then he kind of referenced that in more recent years on the Hail Mary. He referenced it on Brad Stewart's pick six. I put both of those on there. So obviously some iconic moments from him. What do you think what are some of the ones that you stick out to you the most that you remember? Baseball, obviously, like Jeff talked about. That was pretty epic. 2017.
That was a good one. What's the one? Quezzy's behind the defense is one that I remember. I remember the heave to cleave. It's so funny because people always ask us about that, and they're like, "Oh, well, what's it like to watch a game like that?" You're like, "It's a really cool moment," but you also like press Control Alt Delete on everything you've written, and you restarted that moment. So it's like the place is going nuts, Mick Hubert's going nuts, and the press box is like cursing under its breath, like, "Oh my gosh, how am I going to get all of this story, capture this moment?"
And it's hard because like you're ranking them, and like obviously one that made the list was the call from 1996 when the Gators won their first national championship and greatest moment in Gator football history. But like he's not as into it in that moment because it was 52-20. Like the game was over. He doesn't have the same juice as he does on like the heave to cleave or, one that didn't make the list because it just wasn't significant enough. But Tyree Appleby's game-winning 3 against Ohio State, he lost his mind.
Chris Chioza's runner against Wisconsin.
That was on the list.
Madison Square Garden.
That was on the list. So yeah, encourage you guys to go do that and definitely
share with us what were some of yours also. On
I mean, there might be some too that I and Nick and I don't remember from the 90s that aren't as obvious as like Doring's got a touchdown. And
I'm 33. You're 32.
Yeah.
So Mick was calling Florida games before Zach was even a thought.
Well, actually, that's not true.
Oh.
He started in 1989, which was the year I was born. I'm an 80s baby. So he has called every single Florida football game since 1989, which is pretty impressive. So I literally grew up on Mick Hubert. So there will never be another like him without a doubt. So it'll be fun to see kind of him get the farewell this weekend at Condren Ballpark. So encourage everybody to go check out Nick's story on his retirement. Go back and check out those top 10 calls from his career. And also, if you're out at the game on Saturday, make your way over to the Fan Fest from Gator Collective because they are going to have football players, basketball players from all sports there.
Volleyball, basketball, I think gymnastics as well.
Yeah, and Shannon Snell's going to be out there. You already know there's going to be some elite barbecue. And I even saw on Thursday from the Gator Collective Twitter that it looks like Billy Napier is going to be in the house as well. So if you guys haven't bought tickets to that, go follow Gator Collective and you can still sign up for that event. Nick and I are going to plan on making our way over there. I mean, anytime I know that there's ribs being cooked, I'm trying to show up. So appreciate Jeff for joining us on today's show and recapping that epic game against Florida State. Nick will be there this weekend as the Gators wrap up their regular season and get ready for the postseason and see where we go from here. So for Nick, I'm Zach Abolverdi. See you guys next week.